We've had one other business item raised, and listed here as OB1, and it's response to Mayor Stewart's misinformation on social media. We've raised by Councillor Cirillo.
Thank you.
All right.
Richard, are you raising this email as well?
OB2 then would be Mayor Reed's request from Maple Ridge of...
Yes, he's abdicating.
I don't make decisions on behalf of council.
No.
What's this email?
It just came out.
So I was waiting I've been waiting for Mike Clay's response to a question I posed to him. I didn't get it, so I sent it to you anyway.
Okay, so I've listed that as OB2.
Thank you.
There are no others?
We have OB1.
So I didn't hear what OB2, what was it, a letter?
It's a letter request by City of Maple Ridge. It's in your inbox for like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, I just saw it.
And there's a background document, and she's requesting a letter in support of some application she's making to the housing fund over at Metro. So.
And I believe you.
And in response to Councillor Reed's request, OB1
Okay. So I would urge some caution in the use of words when you're describing an agenda item.
OB1 is a request to respond to comments made by Mayor Stewart on social media.
Okay. And OB2. Okay. All right. Off we go.
So item 1 is minutes of the council and committee meeting held on Monday, June 20th. Recommendation to approve.
Moved. Second. So moved by Councillor Hodge, I think, seconded by Councillor Reed. And I just had a comment about the minutes in regards to the installation of the rainbow crosswalk. Just in relation to residents reading this, on bullet point number 4, we say the technical details associated with potentially installing a rainbow crosswalk were discussed. It would be good to just clarify that it was said to be technically feasible. I think that's important information for our residents that are reading this minutes. Is it possible to make an amendment to that, just to add that it was technically feasible?
I would look to other members of the committee if they have a concern in that regard.
I believe...
Yes, Mayor Stewart.
I believe that Mr. Mooney said both technically feasible and legislatively permissible. I see the nodding from the city engineer, and I would be fine with that expansion of the agenda notes.
Councillor Reed.
And I think I was around the table the only person that suggested that I didn't think we needed a crosswalk, so that's why I'm speaking up at this point, because I thought that our city was way above having discrimination like that. But on the weekend, I happened to watch a show on the transgender thing for an hour, and I'm actually appalled that in this day and age that we really have to have issues like this. So I don't have a problem with the crosswalk. I just thought that Coquitlam could say we're above all that. But there we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reed. It was just more about if an external resident is reading the minutes, that it would be good for them to understand that it was presented as being technically feasible and legislatively, whatever Mayor Stewart said. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't here for this discussion. The minutes show that I left early, so I missed this. But in all the other bullet points, and in most of the bullet points that we have and things like this, it talks about the parameters of the discussion. It doesn't zero in. Like right after it says the city's policy regarding proclamations. Well, it doesn't say that policy, by the way, is that we don't do proclamations, and it doesn't also say that this might be tantamount to a proclamation, an argument that I would have made. So to start being specific, and this is an argument, sort of a rationale that we've heard from the city clerk many times in the past when points are raised about the minutes not being specific enough, is that generally they're not specific. That talks about the nature of the discussion, not the specific content of what was said. then we'd be getting into, as Burke has done in the past, a note taker and a minutes taker, then having to sometimes make decisions on, well, what is the actual fact that comes out of this, or where's the agreement on this, and we don't want to go there, and that's been explained many times. So I don't know why in this instance we would want to do that. So, but if we do, then we should be specific about every one of these points.
So thank you for that, Councillor O'Neill. So I would respond by saying that this is just factual information that was presented from engineering, that it is feasible and, I'm sorry, Mayor Stewart, legislatively
Permittable.
So it's
legislatively permittable. So if I look at bullet point number 1, we talk about a rainbow park bench as a symbol of acceptance and diversity. So we explain that one. Number 2, bench highlights differences rather than inclusivity. We highlight that one. The next bullet point, maybe not so much. The technical detail, the city's policy regarding proclamations. We're not going through every single proclamation, I guess. And it talks about it going to a strategic meeting. So I think there's a couple of different ones even in these bullet points. Some have been explained, some have not. All I'm asking for is that the minutes reflect the technical information that was presented from the engineering department.
Can I have a response from the clerk about all those previous comments about not being specific and things like this?
Sure. I think the general minutes are records of decisions, not records of what happened necessarily. I think the other aspect is what is as fact to someone could be opinion to others by virtue of the context that they bring to that. The goal of these is to reflect the range of discussion. When someone says what their belief is, their opinion is, for us to say the opinion that would suggest that it was all of the committee and not that particular individual. So there's reason why we use words like belief or the understanding, or words that allow us to talk about the range of discussion without ascribing that it was accepted by the whole, because we don't know if it was accepted by the whole.
Can I say then that I'm happy to have this being specific if the second one, the next one right after that, is specific as well. Let's spell out what the city's policy is regarding proclamations. And
that seems fairly reasonable. Is anybody opposed to that around this table? I know it's not a voting situation, but is anyone opposed to us also explaining the city policy regarding proclamations? No, everybody seems fine with that, so that's a good.
So what we'll add there is for the fourth bullet.
Just puts in more information in there.
The fourth bullet is the technical details associated with potentially installing a rainbow crosswalk, noting that it is technically feasible and legislatively permittable. And bullet 5 will be the city's policy not to issue proclamations.
Perfect.
Good.
Thank you very much.
So if those amendments are acceptable to the group, the motion would be to approve the minutes as amended.
Mayor Stewart.
Okay, we're going to go down this path, and I think it's the city's policy not to issue proclamations, and a discussion about whether, in fact, this was a proclamation, because that discussion also took place that this proclamation, is this tantamount to a backdoor proclamation, that sort of stuff. And so I would be more comfortable with that, but if no one else has a challenge with that, I'll go with the wording that was just read out.
I have no problem with the wording.
So perhaps
Okay.
to move it forward, what I can say is the city's policy not to issue proclamations and how it pertains to this request.
There.
Perfect.
Okay.
Anybody
Everybody's happy.
opposed to that? Okay. Moving on. We had first and seconded. All in favor? Anyone opposed? No. Carried unanimously.
And a vote of confidence in Sherry, who drew the minutes up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 2 is a delegation. I'd like to invite Charline Hooper to come forward. She's here to speak about concerns regarding Burke Mountain Creek. Other chairs.
That's good. That's good music to start, yeah.
The best opening to a presentation.
Well, we know it works.
The clerk's office has a new policy of walk-up music.
There's something happening here.
That's right. That's right.
Welcome, Ms. Hooper.
Thank you.
I'm chairing the meeting today as acting mayor, but I do like to give Mayor Stewart just the opportunity to greet presenters when they come.
On behalf of council, thank you for coming in. We do have a policy that in CIC, or Council and Committee, the acting mayor of that month is the chair of that committee. So back to you, Councillor Zerillo.
So we're looking forward to hearing the music again and
Okay.
what you have in store for us.
So I have a number of slides. I will be going quite quickly through the slides for your thoughtful consideration. And then at the end, I just have a very brief summary. So let's see if I can do this again.
So much resistance from behind. Time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street, singing songs and a carrying signs. Mostly say hooray for our side. It's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound?
Backwards there.
Sorry, I'm technologically.
There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds are getting so much resistance from behind. Time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street, singing songs.
There we go. That's the end of my slides. So all the pictures that I did, or that I took, were from June of this year. I'd like to say everything starts with a conversation. I'm a concerned resident of the city of Coquitlam. My concern regarding the effect on development of all the streams on Burke Mountain is highlighted with Burke Mountain Creek. In discussion with Mr. Ryan Preston, Qualified Environmental Professional, QEP, Ancon Environmental, Mr. Mike Coulthard, QEP, Diamond Head Consulting, are hired by Westbuild as part of the developer building permit to provide environmental advice regarding forested stream side protection and enhancement areas, SPEAs. Continuing my conversation with Mr. Andrew Appleton, BC Ministry of Forestry, Lands and Resources Biologist, Mr. Hagen Hogendorf, Environmental Services Project Specialist, City of Coquitlam, Mr. Lanny England, Urban Forestry, City of Coquitlam. The role of BC government regarding streamside protection is to ensure that QEP conforms to methodology and minimal standards as set out by Professional Reliance Model, PRM. There is no provincial government assessment, and they rely almost exclusively on the QEP report. At the end of the day, any failures in the environmental management is ultimately the QEP and local government. What I did learn is that the local government can always exceed the minimum standards, and other local governments are looking at changing their bylaws to enhance environmental protection for people and wildlife. The clear cut of Burke Mountain Forest, with resulting narrow, tall, wind, firm edge along Burke Mountain Creek, has resulted in many trees becoming unstable, destruction of fragile ecosystem with trees falling on houses, and lack of protection of the stream as part of the waterways to support salmon, and destruction of a linear wildlife corridor. The issues include, in my opinion, the fast pace of development, the topography, the steep slope, soil conditions, lack of supporting trees and vegetation, wind, drought, early snow melt may all be factors. Hydrology with fast runoff, soil erosion, and loss of forest vegetation to slow the absorption of the moisture has also had an impact, and developers not respecting root and tree protection and healthy supportive trees being removed. I am aware of the May 24th, 2016 initiative to manage trees within SPEAs in Northeast Coquitlam and the current aggressive pruning and tree removal initiatives. I understand the concerns by staff and council regarding the ongoing costs to manage and assess tree inventory and the responsibility of council in the protection of people and the environment. Since a tragedy in Port Moody, there is a heightened awareness of implications to public safety and liability implications. My hope is that council will take into consideration the following concerns when making decisions regarding the streams on Burke Mountain and future Northwest Coquitlam development. Enhance streamside protection to minimum 30 meter each side of the creek. Currently, there's some cases where there's only 10 meters and the development may be too close to the vegetation and damage the tree roots. Consider amendment of building bylaws where homes are required to be as far as possible from the tree line so that if a tree should fall, there may be less chance of impact. In discussion with Mr. Ryan Preston, a suggestion was perhaps greater than 35 meters, as that is the height for many of these trees, and to ensure that home buyers are aware that trees may be at risk and could result in significant financial costs or death. Change QEP assessment from part of the building permit application process to mandatory environmental study reporting to the City of Coquitlam. This report should not be steered by developers. Ensure stiff fines and adherence to environmental protection, perhaps warning and decline future building if lack of compliance. Improve internal communication between city departments, environmental services, urban forestry, building and zoning, bylaw officers regarding infractions. Mr. Preston, in discussion with me, had told me he had reported developer infractions where there was damage to trees, that healthy trees had to be removed. And when I had an adventure day, we'll call it, here at the City of Coquitlam, just trying to find information, everyone knew about the problem, but not of anything specific.
So I'm sorry, Ms. Hooper, I'm just going to ask you, we're well past our 5 minutes, so if we could just actually get a wrap up in your last minute, that'd be awesome.
Provide leadership as an example for best building and environmental practices for across Canada. Clear-cut forests will cause a hard edge and unstable wind-firm environment. Look at practices of supplement planning for a buffer edge to provide an aerodynamic wind flow edge. Replant resilient native trees appropriate to the unique steep slope and soil conditions. Look at innovative ways to collect stormwaters, slow it down, capture as much water as possible to protect salmon. Recognize everything flows downhill, water, soil, and a slide. Please find ways to work with our neighbors, the City of Port Coquitlam, and volunteers at the Hyde Creek Hatchery. Ensure the water quality for silt removal is present, especially up in the mountain with mandatory retention ponds. Work with our natural resources and to avoid changing water courses and mitigating the force and speed of stormwater flows. And embracing the natural resources we have on Burke Mountain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hooper. Does anyone have Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. Just a couple things. Will we be able to get copies of your specific notes so we can get all the recommendations? If you could pass it to the clerk,
Yes,
would be
I have
great.
it
Thank you very much. In there, you'd mentioned increasing the setback from 10 meters to 30 meters,
Yes.
and the house setback 35 meters. Was that a further 35 meters?
35 meters from the edge.
From the edge?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that part. Thank you.
Edge of the forest.
All right.
From the edge of the forest.
Thank
So
you.
that's 65.
Thank you very much, and you'll be leaving that information with the clerk. That'd be great. Thank you. Thank you for coming in. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item, item 3, concerns a report from the General Manager of Engineering and Public Works pertaining to the 2015 Annual Drinking Water Quality Report. The report's before you for information.
So moved, but I have a question.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Hodge. Councillor Reid, you have a question? Mr. Stewart, you're up next.
Yeah, I guess through to our engineer. Is there a brochure advising people what chemicals are used in our water? So I got one phone call on this, and it was from someone who's very sensitive and reactive to certain medications, and whether the medications, the reactions are more profound because of the chemicals we put in our water. And so, sitting at Metro for many years, and I know we put stuff in, but I don't know if Metro puts out a brochure, or we do, or if in fact this is founded at all. So,
through the chair, Councillor Reid, I'm not aware of a brochure that would list item by item what chemicals we use. However, the chemicals that are generally used for improving and preserving the water quality are typical ones, and they are pretty well almost always the same, and we look for those when we test the water. The water samples in the city of Coquitlam are collected by Metro Vancouver, and it's then tested in their laboratorium at our cost. And in some instances, the main chemicals and the results of those tests are disclosed by the test results. So if there's a specific chemical, I can certainly look into and let you know if we use it or not.
no, the question was, is there a brochure?
No, there is
or
not to my
anything?
knowledge.
You know, it may be something for us to take to Metro. I mean, just asking if they have a website and everything, if they could put something out on the website, maybe just denoting some of this, because if there's people that have medications that could possibly be, interacting with what we put in the water, it's interesting. So,
We'll be happy to follow up.
yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
Terry.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Mayor Stewart.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we'll deal with that later.
Sure.
On page, this is to Peter Stevlin. I know that our city manager, who does a lot of work in water and is on the Canadian Water Network and other stuff, I believe you had a word with the medical health officer related to the message from the medical health officer last year, which was outdated and ridiculous. And this year is outdated and ridiculous with an explanation. I'm left with the fact that almost all of our housing today is built with, polybutylene a few years back, lots of PVC, CPVC, and some copper, and none of which, and softened water, or rather water that's buffered such that it doesn't, we don't have the recommendation from the medical health officer, which is something we used to recommend 30 years ago. How do we get him to stop recommending that people run their water for a couple of minutes before they use it?
I agree with everything you've said, that the lead and water issue is a significant issue for older communities. It is the issue that was involved in Flint, Michigan, significant issues in very old distribution systems with a large proportion of old housing stock. Any housing stock after the 1960s did not use the type of materials that are of concern in that regard. And further than that, as is stated in the cautionary note, we have taken pains in this region to buffer our source water so that it's not as corrosive as it naturally would be, which again lessens that. Medical health officer put in this very generic comment, presumably because maybe he got it from a conference of medical health officers across the country. I noticed it last year. My comment to our staff was, this is very inappropriate. Could we not bring that to his attention and stop this kind of messaging, which I believe is alarmist unnecessarily. But when it ended up happening, he has repeated his very generic comments, so that we decided to at least offset that, explaining that it wasn't as significant a concern in our region, or at least in our community, as it is in some of the very old communities. I don't want to be seen as trying to muzzle professionals like the medical health officer from giving the public notices that he deems appropriate. I don't agree that this is our most urgent issue, but I do respect his professionalism and his right to make whatever comment he wants. Going any further than that, I'm not sure is our highest priority at this time, but I would certainly take direction of council if we wanted to formally send him a letter asking him for a more in-depth analysis of what the risks of our water, and maybe focus on some that are of higher priority.
Now, there are certainly thousands of homes in Coquitlam where there's no risk of lead because there's no lead in the plumbing system, and there's tens of thousands more where the risks of metal contamination in the water are so infinitesimal that the risk is higher, that we're simply going to waste enough water and won't be able to fight fires. And so I leave it in your hands, but it frustrates me that he is an expert. I agree he's an expert in the medical health side of things, but the provision of water is, I think we should look to engineers and to chemical analysis to suggest whether there's any risk in British Columbia, in urban British Columbia post-1960. And
I agree, and we will again reiterate that now that it is brought up in this kind of very public forum, to bring it again to his attention, and hopefully next year choose to give us a different message. So we will follow up on that. Thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you. In answer to Councillor Reid's question, quick search on the Metro Vancouver website does have a really good page that shows talks about exactly how the water is treated at the different facilities.
Yeah.
The primary treatment process at the Coquitlam Water Treatment Plant is ultraviolet light, and then ozone, and then chlorine. And
what about chemicals?
Chlorine is a chemical.
No, but more than that.
No, that's it. And then chlorine is added as well, sometimes further along in the pipe, a secondary treatment. But that's it. That's all that's stated, and that's all that I knew about too. And so the second thing I wanted to talk about was just how pleasing it is to see a report like this with our great water system. We often hear about troubles in developing countries about the water, but this year we've heard about it in an advanced economy, in an advanced country, in the United States, of Flint, Michigan, where they did something which they thought, I think, was just as simple as changing the source of their water, but that new water coming in was corrosive to the pipes that were in the system, and it led to metals coming out of the pipes into the system and people consuming that water, and it was criminally negligent from what it appears, what was going on there. Nothing like that happens here. It's very professionally run, and again, and we watch for stuff like that as well. So congratulations on another good year of a good water system. And I can send you the link, May, if you'd like, on the...
No, I just, because that was what I said to her. I said, we wouldn't know, but Metro might know, but I would ask, and so that's what I've done.
Metro has declared no extra chemicals. But
Perfect, thank you.
And has it been moved? Councillor Asmundson?
Just further to Councillor Neal, Councillor, in Coquitlam just recently we had an upgrade at the water treatment plant for ozonization. They've been adding in ozonization areas along the line, which reduced the amount of chlorine going through your water from previous times. So even from what it was years ago with the use of ozonation, there's far less chlorine running in through your waters. And so your water's even way less chemicals in it today than it ever has been, especially coming out of the new upgrade at the Coquitlam Reservoir.
Thank you, Councillor Asmundson. So was it moved and seconded?
It has been.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. I guess I don't have to do that.
Next item, item 4, is the 2016 first trimester report. We have introductory comments by the Deputy City Manager, and the report's before you for information.
Yeah, it just says.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, the first trimester report is before committee today, as noted by the clerk. Overall, good progress has been made on the business plan priorities in the first trimester. There are a lot of exciting things happening in Coquitlam right now. Some highlights from the first trimester include Parks, Rec and Culture Master Plan Draft Implementation Strategy was approved by Council. Agreement in principle with the Talitha Coombs Society for a city contribution to a transitional housing project with city funding to come from the Affordable Housing Reserve. Significant planning towards the Coquitlam 125 celebrations and the 2016 55 plus BC Games. We are also seeing the city transform from an infrastructure perspective. In addition to the Evergreen Line, a couple good examples right outside our door here are the Pine Tree Way streetscape improvements, which are rounding into shape, and the Town Centre Park Plaza, which was constructed this spring and has recently been completed in time for Canada Day. Staff has a very high workload right now with the rapid city growth and we are experiencing, and while we're making excellent progress against our business plan, there have been delays to some of the lower priority projects due to the number of ongoing initiatives. Coquitlam continues to experience unprecedented growth, demonstrated by the construction and development that's visible across the city. Construction values in the first trimester were about $120 million, which is still at a very high historical level. Benchmark prices for residential properties grew over 25% compared to April of 2015. And it was the highest, April was the highest selling month in Metro Vancouver for real estate on record. In closing, 2016 looks to be another very good and productive year for Coquitlam, and we are tracking well against our business plan priorities. And with that, we can open it up to questions, and Graham and I are here to hopefully answer whatever questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dumont. It's certainly a very busy year, keeping staff very busy. Councillor Reid, you're first up.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments. When we start talking about the properties and that, where it says an increase of 25.3 from April and March, the benchmark for residential properties in Coquitlam, that is so far back now. I can tell you for a fact that it surprised even all of us in the industry, where we go in with the normal things we do. We would price something and then find out that it would sell for $50,000 or $100,000 more. There's just no rhyme or reason in this, so trying to put a number to it is a little difficult. My second question is someone in the community said, what's wrong with us that we don't have enough staff in planning and everything's taking so long. And I said, I'm sorry, but we have been tracking planning forever. And we could probably go out and hire 3 people off the street and put them in the planning department, said there, we're now at our full complement, except that they wouldn't have any of the relevant experience that we need. And planners aren't just folks that you sort of pick up if you can, draw a house. So my question to you is, because we've been on to this for years and years, are we making progress, Jim? I mean, we had a horrible thing happen with us and one of our dear members of staff, but are we getting a foothold, and are there any more planners on the loose somewhere?
I can maybe speak to it generally, and then Jim can chime in. But filling the key planning positions has been a priority for us, and we're working on it.
For 3 years, I think we've been asking because.
And yeah, in terms of a point in time, HR has been very busy and filled a lot of the positions. I think we had 57 at the time of that list. By the end of May, we were down to 42, which is sort of below our historical level of vacancy. So we have been moving. As you said, there has been some unfortunate turnover. And some of these planning positions, we are looking for highly skilled, experienced people. So it's not like we can just pluck them off the street. But absolutely a high priority for all of us. And Jim can speak to some of his specific challenges. But
okay, so my second question goes, I don't know where exactly you go. Can you just move over a bit, John? Thanks. I don't know exactly where you go to become a planner, but if there's a planning school or a planning course somewhere, is there some way we could offer those students some kind of a program that we could get them in sooner, perhaps slightly before graduation, and move them on, and so that we can sort of be ahead of the game?
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you. Great points there and suggestions.
Where do you go first?
Where we go? It's interesting. I just had this conversation with Nikki last week, focusing in on some of the schools in the Lower Mainland here. Certainly UBC, University of BC. SFU's got sort of a related program, BCIT, Maylanger, and the planning assistants. In fact, we are doing that. We've been pretty successful in attracting younger staff. Some have come to us as summer students and have stayed. And they have developed over time and have grown tremendously. And you think of some of the young staff in that area. Some have been before council here in recent months. And but that does take time. It's like creating and nurturing a hockey team. It takes time to develop that talent. We've got some good leads right now we're working on. Aside from an obvious one, I'll be introducing a gentleman, which I'm very pleased about at the next meeting. So we have been successful in snaring some good high-level talent. What we are finding with some recent recruitments on both the community planning side and the development planning side is the talent pool out there right now is kind of thin. And I think they've seen this also in engineering, because I helped out Joseph with some of their interviews and that. And it's a competitive market. There's lots going on. There's both public sector and private sector interest and demand for people with those skills. We have been focusing in on people coming out of planning school. We follow up on leads. We've got a summer student we're very keen on right now to come to join us. We've got another one that's been interviewed and will be starting with us here very shortly. Again, fairly straight out of school. We're also doing that on the development servicing and the building side. We're using some of our staff. They're an age where their kids are going through BCIT or UBC, and they've got leads and contacts, and so they're connecting us with people. So
okay, thank you for that. I didn't know you were doing that, and I thought, gee, if we could have some kind of an employee incentive to bring them on, because we have been talking about staffing and planning and development for 3, 4, 5 years, and it's the general public for some reason doesn't think that we have been. And I thought I came up with just a brilliant idea, but you're obviously faster than I am. So
thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear that we're doing that.
It was also my intention to report back to council in the fall. We're going through some recruitments right now, and I know council's concerned with this area, so I wanted to give you an update in the fall once we had a few more successes, and just let you know how we're tracking there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid, Councillor Asmundson, and then Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you very much. Couple comments going through the report. Very good report. I guess this through to Mr. Dumont and to the RCMP, as we talk about vacancies still in the RCMP, but during the budget times in the fall, the superintendent said that we are at full complement now. It seems to be a change in that now that we are no longer full complement?
Mr. Dumont.
Thank you, through the chair. Well, we ended up approving 10 new resources for the Coquitlam detachment, 6 for Coquitlam and 4 for Port Coquitlam. And so those positions needed to be filled, and I was just speaking to the superintendent last week, and there's a bit of a process to get the cadets out of depot. There's a formal process through Ottawa and stuff. That process has now been completed, and those 10 resources are coming to the detachment, but they're not here yet. So that's one of the reasons why there's still shows vacancy here.
Yeah, it just shows a bit of a different information from what we were told during budget time, and that they were at complement already.
Yes, but we added 10 more. We basically added 10 more vacancies with the 6 new Coquitlam positions and the 4 new Port Coquitlam positions. The other reason why there's shows a surplus in the budget as well is depending on the nature of long-term RCMP illnesses, they end up being funded through Div Admin rather than the detachment. So some turnover shows up because of that as well. Div Admin ultimately gets distributed out again, but it will result in some savings to our particular budget and cost to Div Admin. So it's a bit of a complicated process in terms of how they allocate all this stuff.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Going on to what Councillor Reid was saying earlier about the planning department staffing issues, and we've been more than 5 years, it's been for a number of years, it's been an ongoing issue, but I would also say into staff's issue when you read the report, the number of applications has jumped by 54% there. We can't have 54% more staff. So we also get hit with volumes that are just beyond our ability at times to cope, Mr. McIntyre. And this seems like staffing issues this year plus a large volume increase in applications. I know, and I'm still haven't seen it fully implemented yet, about the computerized plan checking. We're a little slow on that, but once that gets in, I think that will help us a lot in that area.
Mr. McIntyre. Is there a question? Is there a question?
Thanks, Madam Chair. If I could, I just wanted to pick up on the councillor's comment.
Is it an answer to a question, or is it just, did you have a question? I didn't hear.
Well, about the staffing levels and regards to the 54% increase and what effect is happening also just on volume.
Go ahead, Mr. McIntyre.
Again, Councillor Esmondson referred to the electronic plans management system. That's underway. It's slowly working its way through. There's been a number of other approaches or procedures we've implemented across the department to get those efficiencies. Because to be honest, the volumes are staggering. We are struggling with recruitments. I think we've had some successes. And I'm just, frankly, I'm surprised we don't hear more complaints. We don't. I think we've got a really good team across the department and working in other areas as well. So they are coping quite well.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre.
Continue on. I guess when I get into the actual business plan priorities update, the attachment, I guess in some ways we show under neighborhood area plans, we show a happy face that everything's looking good. But, you know, really there should be some frowns in here because we have the Pine Creek master plans on hold. We have another city center heritage are on hold. We've got, so that really to me we should be, and we have further down under expand local job and prosperity, we have a project on hold. So when we're doing these things, we should really be also highlighting, because everything looks rosy and smiley and everything's good, but it isn't always throughout the city, and there's some reasons for that. But I think we need to show in here, this isn't on hold or a frown that we're behind here. So I think there just needs some better reporting on when we look at those type of things and how, because there's a few of them through here. There's a number of projects that are on hold that some are at our staffing issues, some are at other reasons for them, but I just would like them to be better highlighted that way.
So would you like to respond to Councillor Edmondson's request for some frowns?
Yes, if I could respond to that. Going by to definition of smiley faces, it has to be 2 or more A or B priority projects that are deferred for it to not be a smiley face. And in that particular instance, it was 2 C priorities, so we were being true to our definition, but I didn't want to give the impression that everything was rosy, and that's why in my comments I said, we're experiencing a high workload and we're having to defer some of our lower priority projects. I wanted to specifically make mention of that because everything isn't a smiley face.
It has smirk now.
Yes, but I'm just saying, it comes to how we report out to the public, and it gives, out of neighborhood planning areas, we have 4 items that are on hold. Now, even if they're B or C priorities, that's still an issue, I think, that we need to relook at when we do these.
And we can look at how we can highlight that better. That actually did stand out to me when I went through the priorities as well. So we'll look at what we can do to focus on some of those.
Thank you.
That's it, Councillor Asmussen?
That's it?
Okay, Councillor O'Neill and then Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. Perhaps we need a new emoji.
That's right.
With wide eyes, like, my goodness, avalanche of work coming our way. Have some hands in the air, too, kind of. That's right.
All in favor of expanded emojis?
That's right. Anyway, I was actually, this discussion led me to wonder about people who are watching this at home might be wondering what we're talking about. They might not know that when we report out, there's these 3 emojis we use: happy face, neutral face, smiling face, to give us a really quick indication of how our work is going. So that's good. Hey, listen, I really like the way that this is presented and the way you put in little things to see if we're actually really reading. So for the entire time I've been on council, we've had A priorities, B priorities, and C priorities. And 2 pages into this, we changed priorities to importance. It goes from priorities to importance. And so then the next 6 pages or 8 pages are all importance instead of priority. And I'm sure it was just a little thing to see if we're paying attention. I was. Let's stick with the priority, because that's what we've been dealing with. I know that they're kind of interchangeable, but am I wrong here?
No, you're right.
Okay.
Did we question you on that?
No, this is just feedback. It's good feedback, I think. Okay.
It's on attendance.
So one thing I want to ask, and just to make sure that I don't compare this to previous ones to see, have any of the priorities on any of these issues changed from the last report to this report? Are they all still the same priorities, or was there some adjustments perhaps made? I don't know.
Mr. Juma.
Thank you. I don't remember. We annually adjust the priorities and report out to council, and council approves them as A, Bs, or Cs, and typically adjusts a few of them up or down. I don't remember which specific ones that were in 2015 we adjusted in 2016. But
staff do not change any priorities. The council process do, and they do. The annual report that we go through. The only time we've ever adjusted it partway through the year is when Raoul started in parks. He felt that some of the parks, like Rochester, should be elevated in priority. Originally, I believe it was a C, and we elevated it. So he did that mid-year last year when he came on. But we never adjust priorities mid-year without seeking council's approval to do so. At the end of the year, we do give the new priorities for the year, and council does endorse that, and they did that earlier this year.
Okay, thank you. In strategic goal number 2, the first thing, Pine Tree Way construction, and you mentioned it in your presentation, Mr. Dumont, and the evidence of which is outside us right now. And that leads me to think that we are getting in the home stretch for the whole Evergreen project. Can you update us on what's going to happen to the Evergreen team that was assembled from the city from the province, and B, the actual facility that they've been housed in, which is a corner of the city center library, which we originally had other plans for and couldn't fill those plans for commercial things of some sort. So where are we now in the use of that team, and where's that team going to go? And in looking at the use of that corner. And on all of that, I just want to say that we're spending all this money to make Pine Tree Way beautiful and functional, And yet on the east side of Pine Tree, there's hardly any animation at all. There's hardly anything that opens on the east side of Pine Tree. And I'd love to see at least that part of the library have a front that opens onto Pine Tree. And so that's why I think it's an important corner of this to start that process.
So, Mr. Dumont, I think the design technique of Pine Tree is really not for discussion today, but if you could respond to the first part of that.
I can speak generally to the Evergreen Line team, and then I think Joseph can add to that in terms of where the resources specifically will go and where things are at in terms of the construction. The Evergreen team, when it was approved on the basis that we would reallocate those resources when the project was done, and there's lots of work going on right now, so there's lots of things for those staff to do. So we're just starting to think about that because the Evergreen project will be winding down in a year or so. And in terms of the construction, as council can see, it's going well, and Joseph can give an update in terms of where things are at. And I think Peter has some comments too.
Mr. Stedman?
Before Joseph and Perry comment on it, because Joseph has some of the staff, but Perry has the bulk of the staff. We have been very cognizant of that right from the start, whereas we added the team on a permanent basis. It was on the understanding that when the work ended, which is coming up within a year, we would absorb those folks back into the complement. And the closer we get to the end, the more attention we place to that. And I know Joseph has one staff vacancy that now he is backfilling with a consultant because it's within a year of that. Another, Jason Cardoni, had been assigned over to that, and he has just been reassigned back to his original position in planning. Still doing 30% of his work in a shared way on the Evergreen Line team. There's a number of different elements to that, and each staff person, we have a different strategy. Rest assured that we will live up to our commitment to council that when the work is over, there will not be residual staff. We are keeping that in mind. And both Perry and Joseph can add on to that if I missed it.
Mr. Giuseppe.
That's the staff part, not the physical building as well.
Right.
I wanted to talk about.
And on that one, it was a long time ago now, so some of them may not have been on council. The original plan was to have a coffee shop there, and we tested the market at that time, and there wasn't sufficient demand for any proponents to set up shop there. It was always our intent that once the Evergreen Line opened, the hope was that there would be enough livelihood in the area that there would be enough demand. So our thought is that at around that same time we would test the market again and see if there is demand for coffee shop. And that Perry is handling that. But we wouldn't do that until the Evergreen Line is up and running.
Good.
And those two issues will come together at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Anything more from your
Just a quick update on the Pine Tree Way project. The project is proceeding very well. We are on schedule. We are on budget, so I don't foresee at this point any issues. The anticipated completion time is going to be early fall, during the fall, so it's all set. As to the east side specifically of Pine Tree Way and more activities, what we should see there, just want to mention that north of the library building, several properties are either not developed or they are not developed to their full potential. And I anticipate that over the next years, that's going to change, and we have plans in the road upgrade project for that.
Thank you. That's all.
That's it?
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Wilson?
Thanks. Just I want to pick up on something I said, Pete. We don't change, or staff doesn't change priorities without council approval, but you could put something on hold without our approval. Is that correct?
Not without telling you. If it's physically impossible for us to do something, we strive to achieve the goals we've set out. I've always said that I pay lots of attention to priorities A. B and C are more likely to slip if there are problems. That's the general understanding of that. If it's getting to the point that as things slow down, if it's a minor slowdown, we don't make a big issue about it, but if it's a significant slowdown, we do highlight that for council's information, and that's what we did with the Village Master Plan. We had reached a point with staff vacancies and strategic initiatives that we simply were not making any headway on that, and we did advise council. There isn't a formal motion to that effect, but when we are not meeting what we were intended to, we do let council know both through this process and separately. Like in that case, I specifically advised council that we were having struggles in that way, and this simply wasn't possible to meet our original intended time frame. So we don't magically turn off a switch and say this is now on hold. It's a process, but we try to keep council in the loop.
And I'm not being critical. I'm just trying to clarify. In the page 4 of the report, it said the RCMP strategic plan is waiting to be approved. Who approves that? The federal RCMP, or is it the city? Or
Thank you. Through the chair, the cities. So the RCMP strategic plan is actually going to be coming to council in a couple weeks. It'll also go to Port Coquitlam and Anmore and Belcarra for their endorsement as well.
Great. Page 9, housing affordability strategy. It says 90% of high priority projects are completed or underway. That's for the actual study, but there's no actual, it's not actual products. Is that correct? 99% sure. I just wanted to confirm.
Got me stumped a bit. Some of the follow-up work has been commenced on. It's not at a point where we're ready to bring it forward to council, but we have been working away on it. But I think we give ourselves a 2-year window for that, the short-term implementation plan. So we are focused on that.
Great. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre.
On page 6, when it talks about vacancies, the vacancy report mentions a portion of the vacancy savings will be used to offset a $500,000 turnover allowance taken from the 2016 financial plan, and I couldn't quite remember what that was all about.
Yeah, we historically didn't budget any vacancy allowance, and even though knowing that there's always a vacancy during the year, and all that turnover money, vacancy allowance, went into the infrastructure reserve at the end of the year. It was about 4 or 5 years ago that some councillors expressed concern with that and felt that we should try to lower our budget and therefore anticipate a vacancy allowance because we knew there would be one. And for the first couple of years, we started it at, my memory serves me correctly, I think it was at $400,000, then we increased it to $800,000, and that was deemed to be too much, and we dropped it back. And for the last couple of years, it has been that stock allowance, which basically anticipates that there will be vacancies. What it does end up doing is reducing the amount of transfer into the infrastructure reserve that will occur at the end of the year. So there's slightly less funding available for capital projects that council may wish to fund out of that infrastructure reserve, but it's a balance, and council turns its mind to that every budget year, and Sheena does walk you through that.
Yeah, no, I remember I partially remember the conversation, but it just seemed like we were, it almost looked to me like we were putting money back into it, but I get it. We're not doing that. And that was it.
Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I just want to start by saying that I really value and appreciate getting these kind of reports, these kind of updates, and I just want to congratulate Graham. This is your first trimester report here in your new role, so well done. Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. I wanted to comment on the Pine Tree Way. Today I saw the Coquitlam being lifted by the crane, the Coquitlam logo being for the light. So that's pretty exciting. Anyway, a little side note. I also, like Councillor Asmussen, noticed as I was reading this, the number of projects on hold. And I kind of questioned the smiley face as well. But I think this is clear for any members of the public reading it, because it says in words that it's on hold. and it says in letters that it's a C priority, and then down further below, it states what the criteria is for the smiley faces or not. So my 2 cents on that discussion. I have a question. Maybe I should know this. I'm not sure. On attachment 3, the development and construction activity, I have 2 questions. How do we calculate the construction values? For example, well, I'm curious how we calculate it, and if it's a huge project, do we divvy it up? Or, I was just looking at the bars, and I'm just curious if that can be explained.
Mr. Dumont, you want to answer? Or Mr.
Thank you.
McIntyre?
I'll take a stab at that. When people come in for their permits, because we part of the permit costs are tied to the value of construction. Construction values are assigned to projects. And Sheena uses the term lumpy. Some of the construction values are lumpy. Big projects. The value shows up here when the permit is issued, so that's the trigger point for the construction value to show up in our reporting here. And so with big projects, sometimes it'll look like we're low for a trimester, but then a big high rise will come through, and then all of a sudden we'll be ahead of what we were last year. So, but basically when projects come in, they have a value attached to them, and at the time the permit's issued, that value shows up on our books in terms of our reporting here.
So at the time the permit is issued?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
just for clarity, so that's from the person that submits the permit decides the value, or because that's what's being asked is how do we determine the?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. What John said is essentially correct. The building permit, when it's ready for issuance, the final plans, the applicant's architect or structural engineer will provide an estimate of construction value. And we can look at that. There's rules of thumb. There's yardsticks you can use to see if someone's sort of grossly understating or overstating a construction value. It's helpful. It's necessary for us because that's the basis of the building permit fees are set as a percentage of that amount, and obviously we track it very closely. It gives a good indication of how the building stock in the community is evolving over time. It relates to our property assessment base for improvements, so it's important to track that as well. And as John said, it can be a little lumpy at times because you get one of these larger high-rises now where some of them are like over 200 units. And you could be upwards of $60, $70 million in construction value. It takes a whole lot of single-family houses, even at $1 million and pop, to reach those sort of numbers. So through the course of the year, you'll see variations as these major projects come online. The other one we track quite closely is the commercial and industrial, because that's obviously very key for, again, growing the city's tax base in those areas, but also more importantly in terms of our economic base and how we're performing there too. So we track all these various construction types and how they're progressing over time.
Okay, thanks. Because the way I looked at this graph is I thought it was actual construction. And so to me it looked like most of our construction is being done September, October, November, December. Because the bars are always highest in the third trimester.
I'm not sure what
it's not that, it's permits.
The rush at the end of the year to get them out. But no, this is when the building permit is issued, and construction takes place thereafter. Now, mind you, with some of the larger projects too, there may be a partial permit, a foundation permit issued before that enables them to get started with excavation and parquet structure construction as well. So.
Okay, thank you, Jim. So my other question, I was looking at above that the new units. So I'm curious, there was 52 single-family homes in southwest Coquitlam and 48 suites. So I'm just wondering, did those 48 suites, were they all part of the 52 new houses? Or was there retrofits, or do we track that?
Mr. McIntyre, that one's for you.
Yeah, that's a good question. By and large, I would say there'd be suites associated with that. I trust they are. But that's not to say that there can't be separate suite permits on their own as well.
Right, okay, but we don't separate that. So there was 4 new single-family homes that were built without suites, right?
I can ask staff to dig into that a little bit more. We can...
I was just curious. Thanks. And then I'd also written down just acknowledgement that the market is very tight, public and private sector, for planning and development. And I was also going to ask you if there was a time frame on filling these critical positions. And I just want to say I'm glad Councillor Reid brought that up, and I'm really glad that we are attracting planning summer students and some of the initiatives that you're doing in the outreach to attract these talented folks to Coquitlam. So
great minds think alike.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that that kind of recruiting is happening. So thank you.
All right, Councillor Marston.
Thank you. Just a couple of very quick things. I appreciate Councillor Rasmussen's comments with regards to the smiling faces next. I've made that comment with every trimester report I've seen so far. I am concerned that when staff are redlining constantly, and are we setting out the right message? So if staff have to go all out redlining constantly, it does concern me that we don't reflect that in some way, shape, or form. Perhaps the words that Mr. Dumont said could build their way into the report themselves. On the variance component itself, attachment 2 speaks to the overall net variance. Can Mr. Dumont perhaps share with us how does this compare to trimester 1 of 2015?
Well, and that speaks, thank you through the chair, that speaks to the RCMP vacancy rate. Our variance in T1 of 2015 was substantially higher, about 2.2 million, and that was largely driven by a large amount of vacancies in the RCMP. So while there still is some vacancy amount showing up here, it's much less from the RCMP this year from last year.
Good. Thank you very much. My other point, I've mentioned this a couple of times in the past. It does cause me concern. On page 3, speaking of notable achievements, speaks to council approval and announcement of the YMCA project. It does concern me that we refer to this as council approval of the project, because the project does have a number of moving parts. The memorandum of understanding is signed. We have identified a third player, but we haven't seen exactly what they're doing yet. So it does concern me that we put into a report that it's received council approval. Perhaps you could speak to that just a little bit for me, please.
Yes, thank you very much for highlighting that. Yes, with large projects like this, multi-year projects that involve the city and a partner or multiple partners, there's typically a host of different approval stages through the process, and yes, earlier this year we did come to an agreement, I guess, in principle or agreement on the general concept of the Y, but there is going to be further stages of council approvals as the project proceeds. Both the city and the Y have to be comfortable with all the details that as they ultimately get developed, and we go through the permitting stage that both parties are comfortable and sign off on the absolute final project. So it might have been better to say approval in principle or approval of the YMCA concept, but we did sit down earlier this year with the YMCA and agreed that they would be our partner and we would proceed with a new Y in Coquitlam. So, but it's subject to all the details being finalized to the satisfaction of both parties.
Yeah, thank you very much for clarifying, because I think that's a very important part, I think, to look at this. I think the work that staff have done to bring this together, to get it to this point, is spectacular. To even have this on our radar, to serve the community for as many years as this will, I think is great. I just wouldn't want to put out the message that, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. We've really just ticked off a couple of check boxes. There's a whole lot more work still to be done here. So thank you very much. That was my last point.
Mr.
Thank you. Actually, I thank Councillor O'Neill for raising the question of the column headings. So I turn to the first page of the sideways table that we're contemplating here. And I noticed that two of the headings have the word priority. The first heading says priority, and it means the task. They're both nouns, but one means the task, and the fourth column, the word priority means the level of importance. And so while Councillor O'Neill would rather the fourth column say priority all the way through, it's probably the case that column 4 should say priority level, or column 1 should say task. But I'll leave that for future reports, because obviously when someone refers to the priority column, we're going to say which one, column 1 or column 4. Then you go to okay, every time I read this, I try, unfortunately, our natural inclination is to try to figure out how to speed projects that we feel are important, move them up in priority, and as city manager refers all the time, everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, so at the same time we ought to be looking at it with a critical eye as to which one, how did that become a higher priority, for example, and I'm looking at at priority number 9, well, priority column 1, number 9, parks, trails, and green space improvements and upgrades. And the fourth item there is Brookmere Park redevelopment. And it's scheduled to be started this year, and construction work next year. And and Mr. Alueva is nodding his head sideways. He's shaking his head, saying that's likely not going to happen. I'm just wondering how it became a priority, and I don't think it is as high a priority as some of the other projects that we've talked about, where someone says, well, we can't do them all. I say, if we're going to drop something, is it possible to drop in the short term? Brookmere Park, Mr. Alueva.
Yep.
Chair, thank you. Brookmere Park was identified as a priority during the rezoning of the Ani development on North Road, and so that was advanced because of funding provided by the developer. However, recently, and just a few weeks ago, we are working with Ani, and Ani has indicated that their capacity is they just don't have the capacity. So we have, through council's authority, we did bring forward Hartley Park and the associated development, the redevelopment of Mountain View Park as part of that project instead of Brookmere. So what we've essentially achieved through council's direction is that we would do Mountain View along with Hartley. And that work is going to be happening later this year. But Brookmere will be completed through a partnership with Ani in 2017. And so this just has not been updated.
Oh, okay, so that requires updating. Okay, good. And Councillor Towner has a question on the table related to historic permit values, and Councillor Wilson asked me and made the observation that he thinks that each of those climbing bars in each year is cumulative. It includes the previous quarter, and it seems odd that we would have tabled it that way, because it
Thank you through the chair. Sorry, I was going to clarify that when we had the conversation a few minutes ago, but that's correct. Like for 2015, if you look, as of the end of the first trimester, there was roughly $80 million worth of construction. By the end of new construction, by the end of the second trimester, it was 260 or whatever that is. Sorry, I'm going all the way across the table there. And then at the end of the year, we were at about 370 million in total. So those are cumulative.
So, and then when you get to December 31st, it drops from 300 and something to zero.
Correct.
And starts.
Yeah. Correct.
Because that makes a lot more sense, because we clearly don't issue 3 times the permits in the fall that we issue in the spring.
We issue a lot, though, because we start building in the spring.
Well, we do issue a lot, but we don't issue 3 times as many. So I suggest that this graph ought to be the quarterly rather than the cumulative quarterly, or sorry, in this case, trimester. But it might be less. I looked at that 3 or 4 times and didn't catch the. So.
Okay, we're done.
Councillor Towner and Wilson.
Are you done, Mr.?
Yep.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I just had a quick little follow-up question to Councillor Martin's question about the why. And just, again, to get it in my head correctly, lots of different approvals have to happen, one of which is probably most importantly the public hearing on the rezoning. Is that correct?
Yeah, maybe turn that over to Raul in terms of the key decision points along the way.
Again, just so the public understands, that.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, council earlier this year did announce the partnership between the YMCA of Vancouver, the City of Coquitlam, and Concert Properties to do a three-party agreement, and it was in a number of agreements with either party, but it's an agreement in principle and a memorandum of understanding that have come together, and that is essentially to deliver a YMCA recreational facility on what's currently Coquitlam Park, also to deliver some additional park at Coquitlam Park, but also an expansion of Cottonwood Park. All of this is it's a very complicated proposal, and it does require, as the Deputy City Manager has indicated, quite a number of steps, including, as highlighted by Councillor Wilson, the rezoning of a number of properties through council approval, and as well official community plan amendments that would facilitate the redevelopment of a number of properties, including the Whitgift Gardens properties by Concert, the Coquitlam Park property by the city, and some additional property that would be the expansion of Cottonwood Park as well. All of those will require a process, a rezoning an OCP amendment process. There will also be background agreements that will have to be ironed out between all the parties for the construction of the YMCA, and those will all be subject to obviously board approval by the YMCA, but clearly council approval through the rezoning and OCP amendment process, which will require public hearings.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to make one comment. I also had circled what Councillor Marsden talked about, and I just wanted to say that it is a very problematic sentence to say council approval and announcement of the YMCA project, because we are expected as members of council to have an open mind as we go to the public hearing, and this sentence could maybe be corrected for the public record. That would be very helpful, I think. All right, I'm not sure. Did it get moved and seconded?
I'll move it.
Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Towner. All in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you.
Madam Chair, that's the last staff report. We do have two OB items. OB1 is response to comments made by Mayor Stewart on social media as raised by Councillor Cirillo.
Thank you. So over the weekend, I was contacted about a Facebook post that was written and posted by Mayor Stewart on his own Facebook page that contained misinformation about the origin of last Monday night's debate on union and corporate donations. On his Facebook page, Mayor Stewart states, received an offensive email from a resident related to Monday evening's debate on the NDP motion to ban corporate and union donations to municipal election campaigns. Now, I've said before in this council that I don't govern on Facebook, and I don't engage in responding on Facebook, but I want to say that in fact Monday night's debate was on Benita Zerillo's and Chris Wilson's motion to ban corporate and union donations and limit personal and individual donations at the municipal level, and that this motion was not brought by and does not belong to the NDP, as stated. It belongs to two elected city councillors from the city of Coquitlam who were responding to the desire of 9 out of 10 British Columbians, and any statement or suggestion otherwise is not true. So let me repeat to correct this misinformation, because it actually comes from me and Mr. Wilson, that Monday night's debate was on a motion that belongs to Benita Zerillo, that's 2 R's and 2 L's, ZARRILLO, and Chris Wilson. Thank you. Mr. O'Neill and Mayor Stewart.
I'm sorry.
Let Mayor Stewart go first.
Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. I guess made reference to the fact that the original suggestion of this was made by the NDP, and I guess I can edit that. And if you do ever find something that you think should be adjusted in anything that I post, you're always best to just message me, and I can change it then rather than wait several days and then bring it up at a council meeting. I should also caution, though, because misinformation, M-I-S-I-N, it's without the hyphen, misinformation is a word that is somewhat charged and has, courts have ruled, can be subject to sorts of interpretations that might not be intended. I certainly didn't intend anything by it. I know that the motion was moved by Councillor Zarrillo. I even mentioned that in the article, I think 2 or 3 times, that Councillor Zarrillo moved, Councillor Wilson seconded. I don't know that anyone would possibly come away with a different interpretation of that, but I will remove the reference to it being an NDP motion. I will, if that pleases you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thanks very much. So this is the first time we've talked about Facebook items around City Council table.
I'm so glad I'm not on it.
And it's interesting that Councillor Zarrillo would talk about that she doesn't like to debate or to do anything like that on Facebook.
Actually, I didn't say that. I said I don't engage in responding to Mr. Stewart, yeah?
Well, no, I think you don't like debating and things like that as well. There was a post from Councillor Zarrillo this weekend that I found quite unusual. It started with her saying that, warning, I'm about to get political. And then she made a very broad reference to there's some kind of language going on right now in Coquitlam municipal politics that is villainizing unions. Now, she didn't back that statement up with any specifics, with any names, with any items. Now, she went on to segue into quite a laudable defense of the importance of the unions that are representing teachers and nurses, and the fact that they're female-dominated, things like that. Good points. That's very good stuff. But I found the beginning very unusual. It's kind of setting up a straw man in a way. And I found the end quite almost insulting. Because I don't know if I was part of the accusation that she was making that there's villainizing unions, but she ended, so go for it, all those politicians that take pleasure in villainizing the word unions, I forgive you. I heard over the weekend, and I've already got this, come to this myself, that was the epitome, I think, of passive-aggressive kind of commentary. After making a broad slam against all of council, without naming anybody on council, but saying these people, and then finishing up by talking about people who villainize unions, saying she forgives us anyway. Well, I just found that quite an unusual post, and something that definitely stirs the pot, and I think stirred the pot a lot more than Mayor Stewart has stirred the pot. But anyway, I wasn't going to talk about it, because I don't want to bring Facebook items to the council table, but Councillor Zarrillo is bringing Facebook items, so I thought I should get this, because it affects us all when she makes comments like that. And thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. So what is the point? I'm sorry, I'm just wondering why, I'm wondering the point of Councillor O'Neill bringing forward someone's personal Facebook page. I don't know if we have a charter ruling on that, or if we have some thoughts about why.
You're asking me the question because you seem to open the door by bringing forward something on Mayor Stewart's Facebook page, which you didn't like. And I thought, well,
I didn't say I didn't like it. I said it was misinformation.
Obviously, you're upset about it.
I'm not upset about it. The motives of someone's mind is not in Mayor Stewart's mind.
Is our role here not to deal with the work of the city? And one might suggest that creeping out in the scope of individual Facebook pages and their individual posts is beyond the scope of the work of the city. I would think in the respect for our staff and those in attendance that we should really focus our work on the work that's being done here at the city, the reports that are being brought forth, and let's move forward with that. If individuals wish to post their Facebook comments and debate their Facebook comments, they're more than able to do so. But I think this table and the one out there belongs to the work of the city. And I think that's where we really should focus our efforts. And while I don't believe I can make a formal motion for it, because it's not a charter issue, I would think that we should show the respect of each other around the table to do this appropriately. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Marsden. And in response to that, do we have a ruling on that from the charter? Because there has been discussion around this table in the past about Facebook posts. So
The charter does not speak to social media.
Pardon? Councillor Town, you're next, and then Mayor Stewart.
Oh, I just wanted to say, well said, Dennis. Before this, when this OB item first came up, I had the exact same sentiment. This isn't what I was elected to spend time on, and it's not using the time of staff or residents wisely to talk about this stuff.
Mayor Stewart, and then Councillor Reid.
I posted something to raise an issue. I've now gone in and corrected it. It took less time to correct it than it's going to take to debate it. In the end, it is awkward, though, when a member of council who blocks me from seeing anything she posts on social media then looks at the stuff I post and raises questions. I'm most pleased, though, at any time to make certain that everything I post is 100% accurate. And if you ever have a concern, please drop me a note. Okay.
Councillor Reid. It's the voice of common sense who's not on Facebook or Twitter or whatever else Donald Trump's on. I really think that the Facebook does no one any favors. It certainly doesn't do the folks out there. I know social media is the in thing, but this is what happens, and this is what it affects us all, in that when someone makes a comment there and then it's not corrected, or it's corrected in the wrong way, we all have to sit there and listen to it. I think too that it's our job to do the business of the city, but I also hate to see the business of the city become a big back and forth on some of these social media sites. And I guess it's hard to resist when someone prints something for any of us to say, you know, oh, you're wrong or you're right, and it's hard to not engage. But I would hope that we can all not engage on city issues on social media. Here's where it belongs, here out in the open where everybody can hear. And if somebody makes a boo-boo, then the boo-boo has to be corrected in the same spot, and it's over and done with. So let's move on.
Thank you, Councillor Reid.
Then second other business item, concern Mayor Reid's from Maple Ridge request, as raised by Mayor Stewart.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, you were wondering how I got to be mayor, right?
Yeah. The other Mary.
Did I miss that part of the meeting? READ. Mayor Nicole Reid from Maple Ridge has asked that we support her application. I've sent it on to council members, her community's application to do a summit, a regional summit on homelessness. I told her I'd bring it up here because she was asking for a letter signed by me that said council support, the city supports it, and I don't write those kinds of letters. I do unless council has expressed its support in the past. And I'd welcome any comments from council members, Madam Chair.
Councillor Asmundson, and then Councillor Reid.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's an interesting comment, but I'm a little puzzled by her statement. I mean, we have a regional housing committee that we have members and all sit on that deal with housing issues and deals with all the affordable housing issues. They have gotten money through the federal government. They run through Metro Vancouver affordable housing units. Isn't that the forum that this should be at? Are we asking maybe for the housing committee at the Metro Vancouver maybe to hold an open session? Might be more appropriate, but by doing so, and I'll put this to the mayor or to staff, are we not circumventing the housing committee? Isn't what we have a regional government, they have a focus on doing that, and should that not be brought up through that avenue first? That would be my question.
Okay. Councillor Reid. Along with where Councillor Asmundson's going, we're almost at summer break. And in September, we have the UBCM, and we have a large communities forum, which basically is most of the Lower Mainland. And perhaps that's where we could talk to UBCM. I mean, this is an emerging issue, but this is a really important issue for everyone. And maybe, I don't know, maybe Mayor Stewart, if you know, but can we not, as a large community, I think we could put this on there, and it's not just the mayors then that are attending, but it's different councillors, because all of us have different feelings about how much we should be doing for homelessness. And you know, I, of course, I will do everything I can for people in need, but I don't want to do everything that I have to do for people who don't need and who are just too lazy to work. So I think there's a whole bunch of applications that come into this, and I think we need a very fulsome discussion, but I think it should be with all the councils. So to me, if we can't send it to Metro, which we could, but then it's a discussion at Metro, then I'd suggest we have it as a large communities item at UBCM and get everybody's input. That's my idea.
All right, Councillor Wilson?
And if that doesn't work,
yeah,
then definitely a regional summit. I mean, homelessness is a regional issue.
Yes.
There's a regional homeless table task. Not our tri-city
but
task group, but a regional task group.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if she's suggesting that group plus other members of the community, but I would definitely support a regional summit. She's called it a summit. That's kind of what she's looking for. Yeah,
with all members of council.
because we've seen just in the Tri-Cities, just our homeless shelter's packed, right? and if there's not a homeless shelter in Burnaby, well then then people from Burnaby come here. So
Or Maple Ridge.
Totally regional issue. The only way it's ever going to be anything really effective is going to happen is if it's done on a regional basis. So I would support a regional summit.
Councillor O'Neill?
Yeah, so I hadn't had time to read her exact letter until now, and I wasn't sure how she was defining region, whether it was actually Metro Vancouver region, the Lower Mainland, or maybe just Northeast sector, as this is Maple Ridge and we're sort of in the same. It looks like she's meaning Metro Vancouver.
Yeah.
Yes, the region. Oh, the project is hers. It's the city's.
Project is Maple Ridge. What regional district is Maple Ridge in?
Ours.
Ours, right, yes, and then it ends just after Maple Ridge, right? So it's Metro Vancouver. Okay, so I'm sort of with Councillor Asmundson and wondering if this should not go through the Metro Vancouver's structure, and if they see the need for this, they should be doing it. I don't know enough about, well, I mean, I certainly know about affordable housing and homelessness, but I don't know whether or not this would be counterproductive or would be welcomed by Metro Vancouver's committee.
And it's funding. It's for money.
This letter is requesting the grant from the federal government.
Just hang on for a second.
It's reflecting.
Just point of order. Could I ask the clerk what would be the best way forward to discuss this? Because it seems there's some questions. We haven't had time to review the email appropriately. And
sure. I've not had an opportunity to review the letter, so I'm unaware of certain time limitations. But I believe what the mayor was seeking, and I sit to be corrected, that he was looking for agreement so that the committee can give direction that the mayor write a letter of support. If there is not that consensus around the table, then I think next steps would be to proceed in another matter, either defer the item so that council members can get information that they would require, or that they feel another form of action should take place.
So to ask, go ahead. You still have the floor, Councillor.
Thank you. So it's to support their application for homelessness partnering strategy funding. What is the HPS? Whose program is that? Is that federal government? Federal government. And they've got money that they're offering.
She's requesting $75,000 to $100,000.
You know what? Okay, we're just kind of learning things on the fly here.
Just on a point of order, sorry, Carrie. She says they're submitting an application next week. So if it's next Wednesday, maybe we could have this week to think about it, look into it.
So can I ask, I mean, who wants to make a suggestion on this, Mayor Stewart or
I just want to correct that last point. she said last week that she's submitting an application next week.
Oh, shoot, you're right. Friday. Oh, yeah, I thought this was an email from today. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
So, Councillor O'Neill, did you want to carry on?
Well, no, I don't want to rush into things without knowing all the ramifications. It seems to be coming to us too late. So I'm not ready to act on this. I'm sorry.
Councillor Reid.
I was just going to bring up the funding when Councillor, it's $75,000 to $100,000. That's a lot of money when we're all going to, we're not going to get anything done before summer anyhow. And we've got September. We've already spent $1 gazillion on UBCM. I don't know why, with the mayor's help and Mayor Reid's help, that we couldn't do something with large community forums. And so it's going to take into consider what, maybe Kelowna? That would be about the only one outside the Lower Mainland, I would think. Perhaps, maybe Prince George or something, but in any event, they are having homeless problems too. So, welcome to the group. I'm thinking, because of the timing, if this were a different month, I wouldn't be suggesting this, but because of this timing, we're ready to get together without spending another $100,000 of taxpayers' money trying to discuss this situation.
Councillor Marsden and then Councillor Asmundson.
Thank you. As everybody's well clear, this has just come to us as a request, and I think having that dialogue in terms of what's available is a good thing. I note that it says the target audience for the summit is municipal political leaders, municipal staff, and executive leaders of organizations delivering housing services. Well, we've recently passed a framework for our affordable housing strategies for some specific actions. Our staff, I believe, Mr. Stedman, if you can correct, has reached out to various providers, housing providers, to introduce them to what we've got available. Is that correct? Okay. Metro Vancouver has recently passed theirs. And again, so I was initially leaning towards where Councillor Rita says let's have a chat at UBCM, but that doesn't necessarily include the providers. So is there value in having some type of forum? There quite well may be. So these providers as a group can find out which municipalities are doing what. Maybe there's somebody out there that we don't know about that we'd be introduced to through inclusion. Where my concern is that, the timing, spring of 2017, what's, aside from a letter of commitment or support, what's the staff time required? Do we have to have a booth? It's the devil's in the details on this sort of thing, and that concerns me a fair bit. I'd really like a little bit more meat on the bone from the request in order to support the funding component of it.
So what I think I'm hearing around the table is we do need more information. Perhaps Councillor Asmundson can.
I just want to mention, there's also another forum open. This is councils in our region, and when you look at housing affordability stuff, it's more designed for those regions and those things. Every region's housing affordability is different, and the solutions to them will be different. And you can bring in staff at the councils. You can bring in other people into those forums and have those discussions. You can do it for a whole day at a council of councils. Maple Ridge just shut down their shelter, so there's issues there going on in Maple Ridge coming from them. So I find it interesting that they're now asking for a dialogue on this, but I think it's too late for us to do anything with this right now. I wouldn't be supporting, as Councillor Reid said, $100,000 when we have other forms that are already there available for this.
All right, so Mayor Stewart.
Okay, so as I expressed in my email to you, and I apologize for having it so late, I was waiting and I put in a call and an email to Mayor Clay and put in another call, and they said they'd get back to me before the meeting today. In the end, I had to press send before I came down here. So I still haven't heard back. Mayor Clay is the new chair of the Housing Committee at Metro Vancouver. I was last year's chair. I'm currently chair of the Regional Planning. Mayor Reid is on the Regional Housing Committee, and I would have thought, as I expressed to council members in the email, would have thought it might have more impact to have a regional summit developed by the regions rather than as described in her synopsis. The summary outlines a proposed project concept of the City of Maple Ridge for the homelessness partnering strategy. In collaboration with other local governments across Metro Vancouver, this project will facilitate a practical conversation that fosters a regional position and regional approach to addressing the current homeless population and the drivers that are resulting in the increase in the number of homeless on our streets. Fostering a regional position and regional approach, I think, is one of those things that the region is well positioned to do, or better positioned to do than individual municipalities. And I want to perhaps have a chat with her as to whether she has talked to the committee at the region that she's on, and if she has, what the response was, and if not, can we not at least have the region be one of those voices that helps set this discussion up, because the discussion is worth having. It's not just housing, and in fact, she makes it clear that this isn't meant to deal with just housing. It's meant to also deal with, as everyone knows, mental health and addictions, which are among the biggest challenges that cause the homelessness issue. So I think we're looking at the local government impact and the ways to move forward is valid, but I have a little bit of trouble with the idea that we're going to that one municipality would take the lead and head off in a direction where I think the region at least should have a good amount of input.
So the email came to you, Mayor Stewart, so what do you want the move forward to be for this council?
Well, if council is in agreement, I don't think we can meet the deadline.
Right. All right. Councillor Wilson, yeah.
I agree with a lot of what's been said in terms of you don't want to duplicate, and are there already avenues to do this. This is such a huge issue, like Mayor Stewart was saying. The UBC forums are tentatively scheduled for at the most 3 hours. I think what they're planning is probably more of a full day, if I had to guess, just looking at it in terms of the cost as well. And so I still, listening intently to what everybody said, I still think it would be a very valuable effort. I would like us to still support this grant application. I don't think it needs to be a duplication, and I think it can really play an important role in trying to deal with the issue in the Lower Mainland.
Councillor Reid.
Well, for me, it's going to depend on who the invitees are. I think we as councils, and I mean mayor and councillors, need to get together to discuss this wherever. I'm suggesting one place to start. If we felt we needed more after that, then we can go for it. But I'm not about to spend a whole day listening to the homeless advocates come in from every city in the province telling us what's wrong, because we've already heard that. We all know we have a problem. So I think the only reason I would be willing to attend this is if we can just sit down as leaders of our communities and try and figure out a solution. But I think we've all heard from all the advocates we need to hear from, and that's how I feel. So it depends on what she plans to do as a regional forum.
All right, so to close it out, it seems like we're supportive in general, but it's just the timeline that's problematic. Would that be correct? So that's kind of...
Simple letter of support?
I think a phone call from the mayor would be, perhaps relating this discussion would be good. Maybe it'll come up with something.
Just sorry, one last thing. I think this also comes out of the LMLGA when we had the discussion on homelessness, and there was a strong desire to look at it from a regional basis. And the president from LMLGA is a Maple Ridge City Councilor, so that could be also again where this is coming from, based on what the feedback was at LMLGA. Look at it from a regional issue. And then this is maybe the
So the mayor's going to reach out by
I intended to phone her
telephone?
anyway, but
Okay.
I'm just not sure I can, in all conscience, meet the request for a letter in support of this particular program until we get more information.
And just by a show of hands, is that generally what everyone's supporting?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry, the show of hands was generally supporting what?
That the mayor will make a phone
Write a
call?
phone call, but not write a formal letter. Yes, I support that.
All right,
Are we leaving it up to the mayor to make the decision on whether a letter will be written, or
No,
there won't
it's
be a
not going to
letter?
be a letter.
It's not a letter
I don't
yet.
have consensus on council to write a letter.
No. Can we have a vote on who would like a letter written?
Yes, we can have a vote. Who would like a letter? Who would not like a letter? Okay.
I tried.
Information.
Thank you.
It was close though.
Move adjournment.
Second.
Not since my
All in favor? We don't need to vote on adjournment.
That's right.
Just we typically do.
Thank you.